Close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture Santa Claus. Don't overthink it. Just let the image pop into your mind. You are seeing a large man, aren't you? He has a belly that shakes like a bowl full of jelly. He has a snowy white beard. He has rosy cheeks, twinkling eyes, and he is wearing a bright, specific shade of red with white fur trim. He is holding a bottle of soda, or maybe a sack of toys. He looks like a grandfather. He looks safe. He looks warm. Now, open your eyes. What if I told you that the man you just pictured isn't really a mythical figure? He isn't an ancient spirit of winter. He isn't even the Saint Nicholas of history. The man you just pictured is arguably the most successful marketing campaign in the history of capitalism. You aren't picturing a person. You're picturing a corporate mascot designed in a boardroom in 1931 to sell sugar water to people when it was cold outside. This is the story of how a soda company hijacked Christmas, erased centuries of folklore, and replaced it with a commercial. This is the story of the Coca-Cola Santa. To understand how radical this takeover was, we have to look at what Santa looked like before the 1930s. If you could hop in a time machine and go back to the Civil War era or the Victorian age, and you asked a child to draw Santa Claus, you would get a terrifying variety of answers. Back then, Santa was having a bit of an identity crisis. In some versions, he was a tall, gaunt man who looked like a bishop in green robes. In others, he was a frightening, hairy creature clad in animal furs, looking more like a wild man of the woods than a gift giver. The famous political cartoonist Thomas Nast drew him during the Civil War, and his version was a tiny, gnome-like elf who could slide down chimneys because he was the size of a doll. He wasn't the jolly giant we know. He was a magical sprite. Sometimes he wore blue. Sometimes he wore brown. Sometimes he wore the American flag. There was no standard. He was a shapeshifter. And then came the 1920s. The Coca-Cola company was riding high. They had conquered the American summer. A cold Coke on a hot July day was becoming a national ritual. But they had a massive problem. The moment the temperature dropped in November, sales fell off a cliff. In the 1920s, people thought of soda as a refreshing cooler, something to beat the heat. The idea of drinking an ice-cold fizzy drink when it was snowing outside seemed ridiculous. Coca-Cola needed a way to convince America that thirst didn't have a calendar. They came up with the slogan, "Thirst knows no season." But a slogan wasn't enough. They needed an emotion. They needed a hook. They needed to plant their flag in the middle of winter and claim it as their own. They decided to target the biggest winter event of all, Christmas. Now, Coke had tried to use Santa before. In the 1920s, they ran some ads with a generic Santa Claus, but they were stiff and boring. They looked like the creepy, strict Santas of old. It didn't click with the public. They needed a makeover. They needed a Santa that looked like a Coke tasted, sweet, bubbly, and American. Enter Haddon Sundblom. Haddon Sundblom was an illustrator from Chicago, the son of a Swedish family. He was a giant of the advertising world, literally and figuratively. He was a big, boisterous man who loved to paint. In 1931, the Darcy Advertising Agency, which worked for Coke, hired Sundblom with a very specific brief. Make a Santa Claus that is real. Not a gnome, not a bishop, not a scary spirit. A man you'd want to hang out with. Sundblom didn't look at the old cartoons. He went back to the source material. He picked up the 1822 poem A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore, the one we all know as The Night Before Christmas. He read the descriptions carefully. Cheeks like roses, nose like a cherry, beard as white as snow, broad face and a little round belly. Sundblom set up his easel and began to paint. For a model, he didn't hire a professional. He used his friend, a retired salesman named Lou Prentice. Lou had a crinkly, happy face and a naturally jolly spirit. Sundblom captured that warmth. He stripped away the bishop's robes and gave him a suit of bright, vibrant red. Now, a lot of people will tell you that Coca-Cola invented the red suit. That is a myth. Santa had appeared in red before, but Sundblom made the red specific. He painted Santa's suit the exact same shade as the Coca-Cola logo. It was a subliminal branding masterstroke. When you looked at Santa, you were looking at the brand, whether you realized it or not. The first ad debuted in the Saturday Evening Post in 1931. It showed this new, human Santa taking a break from his toy delivery to pause and drink a Coke. The caption read, "My hat's off to the pause that refreshes." It was an instant sensation. People didn't just look at the ad, they fell in love with the character. This wasn't a distant, magical being. This Santa looked like your favorite grandfather. He had wrinkles. He had a belt that looked a little too tight. He had flushed cheeks that suggested he had just come in from the cold. He felt alive. For the next 33 years, Haddon Sundblom painted a new Santa for Coca-Cola every single Christmas. And something amazing happened during those 3 decades. The paintings began to tell a story. Sundblom didn't just paint Santa posing. He painted Santa living. He painted Santa raiding the fridge. He painted Santa playing with a family dog. He painted Santa checking his list, looking a little stressed, wiping his forehead. He gave the character humanity. There's a funny story about the evolution of Santa's face. In the early years, Sundblom used his friend Lou Prentice as the model. But eventually, Lou passed away. Sundblom, under a tight deadline, needed a model. He looked in the mirror. He realized that he, Haddon Sundblom, had grown into the character. He was big, he was older, he had the face. So, from that point on, the most famous image of Santa Claus in the world was actually a self-portrait of the artist who painted him. If you look closely at the ads from the 1940s and 50s, you can see Santa aging along with Sundblom. You can see the belt buckle change, because Sundblom painted his own belt buckle, but he was painting in a mirror, so he accidentally painted it backward. The letters on the belt buckle are reversed in some of those famous paintings. Coke received thousands of letters from eagle-eyed kids pointing out the mistake. That's how closely people were watching. During World War II, the Coke Santa took on a new role. He wasn't just selling soda, he was supporting the troops. Sundblom painted Santa appearing with war bonds in his sack. He painted him sitting on a couch, tired, drinking a Coke, with a globe in the background, symbolizing the American soldiers fighting overseas. Coke made sure that every soldier in the field could get a bottle of Coke for 5 cents, no matter where they were. Santa became part of the war effort. He became a symbol of what the boys were fighting for: home, hearth, and holiday warmth. By the 1950s, the takeover was complete. The Sundblom Santa had obliterated the competition. Think about it. When you see a Keep Christ in Christmas bumper sticker or a nativity scene, that is the religious side. But the secular side, the cultural side, it is entirely monopolized by Sundblom's vision. The spindly elves of the 1800s were gone. The scary Krampus figures were forgotten in America. There was only the Coke Santa. This image became so powerful that it leaped off the canvas and into reality. When department stores hire mall Santas, they looked at the Coca-Cola ads to decide what the costume should look like. When movie directors cast Santa for films like Miracle on 34th Street, they were casting actors who looked like Sundblom's painting. We often talk about fake news or propaganda, but this was fake folklore. It was a commercial invention that felt so right, so emotionally true, that we collectively decided to pretend it had always been there. We adopted a corporate mascot as the patron saint of childhood. But here is the nuance that makes this story interesting. It is too simple to say Coke invented Santa. They didn't. They didn't invent the name, the sleigh, or the reindeer. What they did was standardize him. They took a chaotic, fuzzy folk legend and gave him a verified Instagram checkmark. They locked his image in place. Before Coke, Santa was a liquid concept. After Coke, he was solid. And Haddon Sundblom? He kept painting until his final commission in 1964. The original oil paintings he created are now worth millions of dollars. They have been displayed in the Louvre in Paris. They are considered legitimate masterpieces of American art, right up there with Norman Rockwell. So why does this matter? Why should we care that our Santa is a shill for a beverage company? It matters because it shows the power of American myth-making. We are a young country. We don't have the ancient knights and dragons of Europe. So we make our own myths. We made Paul Bunyan. We made the cowboy. And we remade Santa Claus. We took an old European saint, filtered him through the lens of 20th century advertising, gave him a script about happiness and refreshment, and exported him back to the world. Now, if you go to Japan or Brazil or Germany, the Santa you see is the Sundblom Santa. The American commercial version conquered the globe. There's a bittersweet irony in it. We love the image because it represents generosity, giving without receiving, and pure, non-commercial love. Yet, the image itself was created specifically to sell product. It is the ultimate paradox of the holidays. So, the next time you see that big red suit, the wide black belt, and those twinkling eyes, remember Haddon Sundblom. Remember the artist looking in the mirror, painting his own reflection, trying to figure out how to sell soda in a blizzard. And realize that you aren't just looking at a symbol of Christmas. You are looking at the most successful ad in history. One that worked so well, we forgot it was an ad at all.